Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. Well, today we want to examine authentic learning. What does that look like, and how is it different from other kinds of learning? Authentic learning involves feeling, it involves deeper topics. It involves being a little bit vulnerable because you're giving your point of view about something. It doesn't have to be necessarily personal about your wife, family, or community, but it does have to have something in it which involves you, your feelings, and perhaps your morals or principles. It's something which should light that fire within you and make you feel happy. And in turn, when you can express that thing in a second language, it makes you feel connected to that language. Now, that's a very different thing from buying a grammar book and filling in the blank spaces with an example of a conditional, an example of a passive voice or a causative. These things usually don't have meanings for us. And because they don't have meanings, we easily forget them. Our learning time, and even with teachers, is often talking about very shallow things. Things which we don't really care about, but maybe things which we do. Even exam questions sometimes ask us things which don't seem to be very relevant. For example, describe a sports match that you attended that you really liked. Describe a time you visited a shop or a coffee shop. These are not things that anyone sits at home and discusses with their family. So authentic learning takes us a little bit deeper into a place of learning where you can actually connect with the language. But let me give you a few points here. First of all, authentic learning doesn't have to be personal. It doesn't have to be about talking about your wife or your children and problems or finances. It doesn't have to be talking about problems in your community. In a country like the UK, for example, where there isn't any community anymore, it's very hard. If someone asked me, talk about the problems in your community, I would say, my community? I don't have a community. My town doesn't do anything. People don't talk to each other. We're British. So there isn't any community. My community is the time I spend with my students, for example. I guess that's my community. You have to get real and really touch in to your feelings, your life, and what's important for you. One good way of doing this is by asking your teacher to discuss topics which have a greater authenticity for you. So, for example, there's a website, esldiscussions.com. It has a lot of topics, and within each topic, it has 10 questions to try and make you think about how you feel about the topic. And this is a great way to get some kind of authentic conversation. That's point number one. Point number two about authentic conversations and authenticity is that you need to be prepared to be vulnerable. That means passing information that you might be a bit uncomfortable with. So, for example, if a teacher asks you, what do you think about, let's say, romantic relationships? Okay. You don't need to talk about your romantic relationship, but if you come from a community where arranged marriages are more common, you need to be a little bit vulnerable to be open-minded enough to talk about these kinds of issues. That's how we grow, by giving our opinion authentically rather than just trying to, as we say in English, wing it. To wing it just means to try to give false answers or pretend you know about something that you don't. So, authenticity in conversations is really important. This is something I really struggle with because as a teacher, of course, I want to bring out the best of your conversation. But I have to be very careful in doing that because there may be all kinds of cultural barriers about talking about certain things. And there's also a way that it needs to be done without being too personal. But it needs to have some kind of meaning. So the next time you're with your teacher, you can try this. You can choose a topic that you want to discuss. It might be a topic that feels important for you. You know, it could be something like the treatment of animals. Maybe you work with animals. It could be something about a lifestyle, maybe you know about in the UK or in the English world, that you're curious about, that you want to ask about. It could be about one of our minorities, or maybe you want to explain about something in your country. To come to an English class without authenticity is a little bit worrying, because you can go on the internet, you can go on any of the social media platforms without having authenticity. But if you want to engage in authentic learning, you need to bring all of you to the class. If your teacher doesn't ask you those deep questions that you want to know, or you want to explore, then you should bring the topic and tell him, this is what I want to talk with you about today. And he should be okay with that. If your teacher is one who has grammar lessons already every time he has a new bit of grammar, and he's not allowing you to be authentic and honest and open in the classes, then you should tell him. I know this is perhaps something that's a bit difficult. Many cultures have a great respect for the teacher, but to be honest and authentic with yourself and not to waste your money, you need to find authenticity, things that light that fire inside of you. And if that doesn't happen in an English lesson, you should be asking yourself why, because it's usually the content that's the problem. One difficulty I have in learning Persian is that in Persian culture, which of course is a very strong Islamic culture, there are things which don't exist, which are here in the UK. So, for example, people living together, a diverse community, living with other minorities. Some of these things are very difficult when you talk to someone who comes from a culture which perhaps is a little bit more closed. So this raises other questions about how can you be authentic? Do you just want to go in there and say, you know what, my culture is like this and I want to talk about it? Or are you open-minded enough to explore the culture of the language you're learning? There's all kinds of things come up when you try to be authentic. But I'm telling you all of this to try to move away from the books to get into something a little bit deeper. When you build a house, you have to lay the foundations. The four cornerstones have to be put down. In language learning, of course, those four corners are speaking, writing, reading, and listening. And you should be building those walls equally. Some teachers encourage their students to draw structures of their learning process, like drawing a box which has four boxes going up and then four boxes going along. It's 4 by 4. And on the bottom, you write in the boxes reading, speaking, writing, and listening, and then you build on that and you write in each block your progress. And in the middle of that diagram, there should be a line which takes you up to the next point when it gets into your consciousness. It's a map of consciousness. If you want to explore that, the next time you have a lesson with me, ask me about it, and I'll show you how you could create your own structure to monitor your learning. Whatever way you learn today, it just has to be a little bit more authentic. Now, if you explore authentic education on the internet or authentic learning, you'll see that already there is a system there which is copyrighted and being used and sold by English teachers. It doesn't have to be like that. That system is about empowering people from communities to talk about problems in their community, to talk about problems in their lives. But the truth of the matter is, most of us don't come from communities anymore, especially in the West. Many of us spend so much time alone that it would be very hard for us to define what or who our community is. Likewise, in an English lesson, you don't want to be talking about your personal problems. A good teacher should be lifting you away from your personal life to talk more about things which you can give a viewpoint on without too much emotion, but with authenticity, clarity, and confidence. Whatever your learning looks like today, I really encourage you to try to be more authentic with yourself. That might be being more honest about how you can achieve your goals with learning. And I'm talking specifically there about the amount of time you have available, because on Italki, on our system that we use to teach, I can see that many of you are really, really struggling with time. Many of you have to cancel at the last moment because of work meetings or work commitments. That doesn't sound very authentic. That's pushing English away in favor of something else. So there's a real need to look deep inside, not only about your learning process, but about priorities, about time, about the way in which you want or you're going to be moving forward with learning. And then on top of that, I mean, time is one of the foundations of learning, of course. But once you build on top of that, you can then begin to look at how you can bring your life authentically into learning. That's a very different thing from simply trying to hold on to a grammar book which asks you if you have a dog. One essay of authentic expression is much better than 3 pages of a grammar book which say nothing. So, I encourage you today to take a pen and a bit of paper and to write down 10 things which are very important to you. That could be something like going to the gym. For religious people, that could mean going to the mosque or going to the church. And I want you to begin by talking about how you go to that place and what you do in that place. Now, I'm not asking you to write some thesis about religion here, okay? Because it would be too hard, even in your own language. But I'm just beginning to ask you to explore 10 key things or 10 key words in your life to bring about a sense of authenticity of how you would bring those things to a second language. And then you can think about maybe writing an essay or a short story about one of those things. And it would be more motivating, wouldn't it, if you're writing about what you do at the gym or even your ritual of going to the gym. How do you get there? You get up at 6, you go at 6:30 before you start work. Whatever things you want to write about, as long as they're authentic, have meaning, and have feeling from your heart, this would make an ideal lesson study. And that's a very different thing from picking up the grammar book. Well, I hope that's given you some kind of introduction into authentic learning. It's really important, and you might think, well, no, I just want to learn English. But if you don't connect your life with it, you're not going to get very far, especially if you're older or if you're sensitive. I hear this a lot. Oh, my English is going nowhere. I don't know how to make it better. I don't know what to do next with my English, how to push it forward. And then I simply ask the question, does your learning process match what your values are? And usually the answer is no. I'm reading a book because it's English, because it's Harry Potter. Do you like Harry Potter? Well, no, not really, but my teacher said I should read it. That doesn't really show authenticity. That just shows following commands. So, looking deep inside to see what really lights your fire is very, very important. And it's so easy to lose sight of that, especially when we're all living in cultures which are overrun by superficiality. There is one thing I really admire about some students. They're not afraid to say what they think. The other day, I gave an essay to someone about animals. I told them, tell me about your favorite animals or how animals are in your country. And the person replied, that sounds really boring. Can I write about something else? And I said, of course, of course. Tell me, what's your passion and write about it. There's no point going to a teacher and paying a lot of money for him to ask you to do something which you wouldn't normally do anyway, you know? I mean, in your own country, if someone said to you, for example, I want you to write an essay about farming, and you live in the middle of the city, what would you say? You'd say, why would I want to do that? So why would you want to do that in a second language? Authenticity is one very, very key point. And if you're making friends and language partners in a second language, my advice to you is to be extremely, brutally honest from the very beginning. Because when it comes to other cultures, you're always going to find people who like you for some reason and people who don't for some reason. But the more honest and authentic you can be with people, the more you're giving them the chance to decide what kind of person you are. So it's just something to think about. So learning with clarity, authenticity, and meaning is something that you should expect from your teacher. And if your teacher really is just asking you things that you think, well, I don't want to talk about that thing today, tell him. Just say, well, I have no feelings on this. Sorry. So I don't want to talk about it. A good teacher will never, ever talk to you about politics or directly subjects directly related to politics or religion, but they might explore with you what your feelings are on particular topics and allow you the freedom to bring and explore those topics also. It's your money, it's your time. Why would you not want to be authentic with that? All right, that's it from me. So I'll catch up with you all again soon. I'm aware this podcast has been longer than usual, but I had a lot to say about authenticity today. I'll try to make longer podcasts from time to time. Some of you are telling me keep it 5 minutes. Some of you are telling me no, 20 minutes, half an hour, please. So maybe once a week I'll try to bring in something a bit longer. There we are. That's it. See you all soon. Bye.